Hello YouTube, how's it going? This is the crossover and I'm back with another video. Today I decided to pick 7 of my favorite players who are projected to go in the second round or will go in the second round on next Thursday's NBA draft. These are 7 guys who are amongst my favorite players in this class. However, I just didn't necessarily get the time to, make in-depth individual videos on all of these players, right? So I decided to pick about 7 of my favorite guys who are projected to go in the second round, and I'll be giving basically a mini scouting report on these guys, giving you guys, the usual breakdown of their stats, as well as, some strengths and weaknesses real quick, and then discuss what I think their roles could potentially be at the NBA level. So without any further delay, let's get straight into the video. Moving on to the first player I want to discuss today, which is Vince Williams Jr., who was a senior out of VCU this previous season, who is 21 years old, stands at about 6 feet 6 inches, weighs about 210 pounds, and has a 7-foot wingspan. Impressive physical profile for the senior. That length that I just listed or just read off really stands out on the court, right? You can really see his length and the way he utilizes it in 2 of his biggest strengths as a prospect, which is his shooting and his off-ball defense, as he utilizes his length to really create turnovers, has a solid defensive IQ, especially off-ball, where he's able to create turnovers, especially out the strong side, and he had absurdly high assist and block rates this previous season for VCU, and that's probably going to be his biggest strengths on the defensive end of the floor. And also with the shooting, he really utilizes that 7-foot wingspan to really have a high release, and that allowed him to have not only solid shooting percentages, which he did shoot. He had a 59.1% effective field goal percentage this previous season, shot 81.4% from the free throw line, and 38.7% from the three-point line. However, what really stands out is that 68% at the rim, which is very solid, as well as shooting 47.7% from the mid-range area on the court, which from all 3 levels on the court, from the rim, from mid-range, and from the three-point line, you can really see how efficient he was as a player. And part of that is part and due to his length and then the way he was able to just get to his spots on the court. He wasn't necessarily an on-ball player for VCU, which I will say was one of his weaknesses this previous season. And it's probably not that bad looking at his long-term projection into the NBA, where if he does have a career at the NBA, a long-term one, it will be as a role player, being a guy who's going to be able to knock down shots and be a versatile defender. And he's also a very underrated playmaker, which leads us into his stat line, where he did average 14.1 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.6 steals, 1.1 blocks, and 2.9 turnovers per game, right? You really see that length that we just talked about, right, in the rebounding areas. And the 1.1 steals, the 1.1 blocks, you really see him creating those turnovers, right? And you also see those 3 assists where, even though he only had, he barely had a positive assist to turnover ratio, you still saw the flashes of him being, a secondary playmaker and a guy who can make passes out the short roll, as he was really utilized a lot more as a big man than you would originally think playing for VCU this previous season. However, on-ball defense wasn't a great strength of his. As times he was liable to get beat off the dribble by a lot of quicker guards this previous season, which is a knock on him. And he doesn't have the best handle in the world. However, that's okay, because the on-ball defense is definitely going to have to improve, and I think it will, with proper coaching and just Vince Williams. I think he just has a high IQ on the defense side of the floor, and I would imagine that he would continue to improve on as an on-ball defender, right? However, just given his strengths as an off-ball defender, and with his shooting, with his length, with his age, and I still think there is a lot of room for Vince to grow as a player. I can see him carving out a role at the NBA level as a two-way player, right? A guy who can knock down open shots, make some occasional nice passes, maybe as like a tertiary, facilitator in your offense, and a guy who can be, a solid defensive player who can, guard multiple positions with that length of his and that IQ and that ability to create turnovers. So even though Vince Williams isn't necessarily projected that high on most consensus big boards, I have him as a top 40 player on my big board, simply because of all the strengths that we just talked about, with the shooting and the off-ball defense and the upside as an on-ball defender, and some of that, playmaking that he has flashed. However, I do get the weaknesses, how people kind of hold that against him and kind of keep him as, a bottom 40 as a bottom 45, as a sub 45 pick, right? But I like his strengths, and I believe in Vince Williams' strengths enough that I think there's a good chance that Vince Williams can carve out a role for himself as an NBA player. Moving on to the second player I want to discuss today, which is Jaylin Williams, the sophomore out of Arkansas, who is 19 years old, stands at about 6 feet 10 inches, weighs about 235 pounds, and has a 7 foot 1 inch wingspan. Relatively impressive physical profile for Jaylin. However, I think the on paper statistics with his measurements is more impressive than the eye test, as I think there are times where he can be a bit undersized out on the court. However, that doesn't stop him from having an impact, as he was not only the most impactful player for a Sweet 16 team this previous season, but he was their best player undoubtedly, as he was a sophomore. So this was his second season this previous year, which means he is a true sophomore, right? You see a lot of guys be like 19 and sophomores, right? They kind of take that skip year. We all know about it in sports where they players or parents will hold out their kids, in as a freshman, keep them back before entering high school, or use some other bull excuse. I'm sorry, it's just it gets on my nerves. So to see a true sophomore is pretty nice. Another example, not to go on a tangent, but Ty Washington is 20 years old, right? As a freshman, I'm turning 19 in literally a week from now, and I'm a freshman. I was a freshman at the same time as Ty Washington. So to me, that's just absolutely ridiculous. But anyways, back to Jaylin Williams. It's nice to see him be a true sophomore, and again, he was the most impactful player for Arkansas this previous season, and the on-court stats back that up, as he averaged 10.9 points, 9.8 rebounds, 2.9 assists, 1.3 steals, 1.1 blocks, and 1.8 turnovers per game, right? Just by looking at the stats, you can see the impact that he had there on the court. He was great scoring without the ball in his hands this previous season. Even though he wasn't averaging crazy points totals, you could just see his impact in other areas on the court, not only scoring, but he did average pretty much 11 points per game, which isn't bad. A majority of those points came off of little floaters here and there, but a lot of cutting, a lot of backdoor action, just moving without the ball in his hands, getting himself open, and getting up shots. And considering that really Arkansas's offense was really primarily JD Note and Jaylin Williams, that's extremely impressive. And a lot of his scoring came without the ball in his hands, which again is you really like to see, because that's something that you can definitely see translating to the next level, right? Just his IQ and his ability to move without the ball in his hands. And also, you see the rebounding. He was an awesome defensive rebounder for Arkansas this previous season. Had about almost a 30% defensive rebounding rate, which is very good. And I think he was a much better defensive rebounder than an offensive rebounder. I think, as I alluded to before, he can appear to be, undersized at times. And I think you really saw that on the offensive side of the glass. And to go over more of his strengths, I mean, you just see the positive assist to turnover ratio as a true sophomore, 19-year-old kid to average 3 assists. I mean, it was evident on the court just how good of a passer Jaylin Williams is, just hitting cutters in stride, hitting backdoor cutters. He just always seemed, if there was an open man or even, just the slightest window, Jaylin Williams was going to hit it. And even though, the 1.8 turnovers, it's going to come, right? Just because of how much of the offense ran through Jaylin Williams. He was going to have, a turnover here and there, but to still see a positive assist to turnover ratio out of a true sophomore, it's very impressive. And I think the biggest strength of Jaylin Williams has to come on the defensive side of the floor, and just his overall versatility on that side of the floor. He's able to cover multiple positions, right? He's not the best of rim protectors, but he does offer some rim protection, right? Again, being a little bit undersized does hurt him a little bit here, especially with that wingspan. You'd like to see it be a little bigger, but he can make plays here and there, right? And you really see it in terms of being, that off-ball player, especially in the strong side, where he's able to pick off ball handlers with that drive near him, right? He's able to pick off these passing lanes and garner those steals. And he's just such a versatile all-around weapon on both sides of the floor that I can't not see Jaylin Williams having an impact at the next level. However, I think what holds him back is definitely his efficiency. That length really hurts him at finishing at the rim. And I think that's really his biggest weakness right now. Is I think Jaylin Williams has to be a better finisher around the rim. And again, I just said that a lot of his finishing comes without the ball, right? Cutting and whatnot. So you might be like, what do you mean, right? However, I mean, when there's a defender in front of him and he doesn't just have like an open shot, and he has to adjust a little bit, right? And you kind of see that a lot with, the 63% finishing at the rim. That's not good for a big man. That's just objectively not good. And that's something that he's definitely going to have to work on, given his limited measurement and, relatively limited athleticism. How much can that improve? That's part of the reason why he's a second round guy, right? But, you take a look at some of his other strengths. He wasn't a bad shooter from the free throw line, essentially 73.9, 73%, 72.9% for a big man isn't terrible. However, it's not great, right? But he does show some flashes as a shooter. And you might look at the 23.9% from three and be like, how can you say that? But the form isn't terrible. I think there is some upside there. However, it's not a lot. And he did shoot 38.7% from mid range, and I think a lot of that just came with that was more so floaters than like outright shots. So he definitely does have a lot of areas to improve on, right? As I stated, the rim protection isn't great. The finishing at the rim isn't great, and the shooting from behind the arc isn't great, right? But when you look at just what Jaylin Williams offers as a prospect, right, as a big man, with his passing, with his ability to move without the ball in his hands, with his ability to create turnovers both around the rim and out there on the perimeter, right, as a potential versatile defender at 6'10", as well as his ability to draw charges. I mean, that's Jaylin Williams is known for his ability to draw charges. A lot of them are a bit foolish at times. However, he's able to garner a lot of real charges. And you just take a look at all these different strengths. It's just such an all around big man that it's hard to imagine Jaylin Williams not having a spot in the NBA for a long time to come. And he's definitely a top 40 guy for me. A top 35 guy for me on my big board. Moving on to the third guy I want to discuss today, and that is Alondes Williams, the redshirt junior out of Wake Forest, who is 23 years old, stands at about 6 feet 5 inches, weighs about 210 pounds, and has a 6 foot 7 inch wingspan. Not the best physical profile that we've covered so far on this channel, as he does seem a bit heavy and not doesn't have the longest of wingspans. However, Alondes is able to overcome a lot of weaknesses that may appear like weaknesses on paper. Another huge weakness outside of that, he's just not necessarily he doesn't have the best physical profile, is definitely his shooting on the offensive side of the floor, as he shot, or his perimeter shooting to be specific, as he shot 28.4% from behind the arc. And even though his form is solid, I think there is a bit of a hitch where he does hold it a little bit at the point of the release, and his feet kind of jump forward when he's shooting. I think outside of that, the shot isn't terrible, but it's definitely a big weakness, and I think it's something that he's definitely going to have to work on. However, outside of that, Alondes is just such a talented player. I mean, this season for Wake Forest, he did average 18.5 points, 6.4 rebounds, 5.2 assists, 1.2 steals, 0.4 blocks, and 3.6 turnovers per game. I mean, just the stats speak for themselves. The basic three stats. He was just able to impact every facet of the game for Wake Forest this season. Just such a good slasher in general, and just he doesn't have the deepest of bags. However, he has this one move where he kind of gets down low and he kind of hits his defender with a curl, and then he kind of sits on it and he's like low, and then he kind of hits them with the AI exaggerated cross, and he's able to get to the basket at will with that move. It was very impressive to see. And again, he doesn't have he's not the quickest of players, but he just has that enough of quickness, that first step to really get by players consistently, right? And even though he does seem a bit heavy, he's able to get up there. Like Alondes Williams had some thunderous dunks, and he's able to bang on people's heads sometimes, right? He's able to put some guys on posters, and that's impressive considering a guy that's 6'5", 210 pounds. And I think that's definitely a part of his game that can translate to the NBA level, right? Being able to play without the ball in his hands. However, I think he's going to have to do a little bit of learning how to play without the ball in his hands, as I do think there were times for Wake Forest where when the offense was running through him instead of Jake LaRavia, where it was a bit slow. And even though without a doubt, Alondes' best strength is his facilitating. He, just from a talent perspective, he's able to just whip passes across the court with either hand at will. Like one hand, just simple with the flick of the wrist, just move the ball from the wing, the foul line extended on the right side of the court to the left side of the court corner. He's able to just make such great passes. Just look so easy. He's able to hit cutters, find the smallest of windows and thread needles through them. He is without a doubt, in my mind, the most gifted passer in this class. Now, the question is, will he be able to utilize that talent and utilize the rest of his strengths to kind of find a role in the league and work on his weaknesses enough to the point where, again, he can find that role in the league. And those weaknesses include the shooting, right? Not only from behind the arc, but from the free throw line, it wasn't great, right? 69.1% from the free throw line, and that really in turn brings down his effective field goal percentage, right? 54.9% from overall, right? That effective field goal percentage. However, he shot 41.9% from two, which isn't terrible. It's not great, I wouldn't say, but it's not bad. It's right? It's mediocre. And again, that shooting is definitely something that he will have to work on. However, he shot 66.7% at the rim, which is great. He's able to finish with either hand around the rim, and he's really athletic, so he can really get up there, and he knows how to use his body and really adjust to contact, and uses his body to shield the ball and get up shots in traffic. So he's an awesome slasher, in my mind, the most talented passer in this class, and he's a very solid defender as well. I didn't necessarily talk about his defense much, however, I think his off-ball defense, especially that weak side defense, can use a lot of some work. I think he can fall asleep from time to time. However, as an on-ball defender, he can get beat by some really quick guards. However, for the most part, he's able to kind of use his strength and size to kind of body up a lot of guards, and especially forwards. I think that's an underrated part of his skill set that I think could translate to the NBA game, where he can use his size to not get bodied in switches and hold his own in the post, right? So and then also as a strong side defender, he's not bad. He's also able to create some turnovers and kind of swipe at ball handlers, right? So overall, I really like Alondes Williams. However, I get the weaknesses, right? With the shooting being a major liability, him being 23 years old and not having plus not having a plus physical profile, right? I get the weaknesses with him, and again, some of the IQ things here and there, with in terms of running the offense, knowing when to pass, holding onto the ball a little bit too much with and some mishaps as a weak side defender. However, just given his strengths, right? Just how gifted he is as a passer, how good of a finisher he is, how tight of a handle he does have already to this point, and some of the flashes that he has shown as a versatile defender. I just think Alondes Williams is just too good to not find a role at the NBA level, right? And I get all the weaknesses, but when you have a guy with one elite skill set, and Alondes Williams definitely is an elite passer, I find it hard to believe that Alondes Williams won't have some sort of role at the NBA level. Moving on to the fourth player I wanted to discuss today, and that is DEREON, the sophomore out of NC State, who is 21 years old, stands at about 6 feet 6 inches, weighs about 180 pounds, and has a 6 foot 8 inch wingspan. Not the best physical profile on paper, especially with not having necessarily a strong plus of a wingspan, and he seems to be a bit on the lighter side with that 180 pounds, right? However, when you watch him on court, DEREON is 180 pounds of muscle. I mean, this guy is an absolute force, a tank on the offensive side of the floor, as he was hands down the best slasher in college basketball this season, without a doubt, and is 100% the best slasher in this class. I mean, it's not even close in my opinion. I mean, this guy, we're going to kind of jump the stats for a second, as he shot, you might look at, he only shot 55.5% at the rim, right? However, when you look at the number of attempts, he took 319 attempts at the rim this previous season. That was without a doubt the most in college basketball. The second highest was Armando Beckett at 305. So this guy shot DEREON shot 14 more shots at the rim compared to a center who was being spoon-fed shots, open shots around the rim. I mean, that is just absolutely absurd, especially when you look at the talent that he was playing with. He was playing with one of my favorite prospects who decided to return to college, and it is currently my top returning sophomore in Terquavion Smith. Outside of those two, I mean, that was it. This NC State team isn't necessarily all that talented, and it was really just DEREON and Terquavion out there against the world, against the ACC, which was a very good. It wasn't the best conference in regular season play. However, they had the likes of Miami, Duke, UNC, very talented conference overall, right? So for him to be able to do what he was able to do with the lack of talent around him is just absolutely incredible. I mean, teams were game planning to not let DEREON get to the rim, and he was still getting to the rim. And just with the strength, the athleticism that he has, the quickness, he was just able to utilize all of that and just get to the rim at will. Now, is he the best at finishing? No. But I mean, when you have 3 defenders waiting for you at the rim, I mean, obviously you're not going to be some elite finisher at the rim, right? I mean, that's just a given. And maybe if he had a bigger wingspan or was a little bit better as a vertical athlete, maybe, but I mean, it's just so incredible what he was able to pull off. And then just looking at his on-court at the stats, he averaged 17.3 points, 8.2 rebounds, 3.2 assists, 1.4 steals, 0.1 blocks, and 2.4 turnovers per game. Now, again, the rebounding shows off just with his strengths, right? Again, again, as I stated, the physical profile doesn't do DEREON SEABRON volumes in terms of just how athletic and strong he was. He was able to get to the glass and really get those rebounds and push the ball, create opportunities in fast break situations for NC State, and that was really impressive. And outside of really attacking the rim, which DEREON SEABRON's kind of funny because he's such a gifted slasher, but outside of that, his game desperately needs work everywhere else, right? NC State decided to put the ball in his hands, during the season and kind of make him their point guard, and I don't think it really translated to a lot of team success, right? He's not the best of playmakers. He can miss open windows, especially dump offs to big men and open shooters out on the perimeter, which isn't great, considering the fact that he was the best slasher in college basketball, and he wasn't able to create or recognize open teammates, right? That's something that you wish he was better at. He's not a great shooter, not a great shooter at all. A bad shooter. He shot 25.6% from the 3-point line, and the eye test backs up the percentages. Poor shots, needs to work on his shooting mechanics, the release. I think his shooting hand could use some work as well. Off shot, and he didn't shoot great from the free throw line, 71.3%. Maybe he can, there's a little bit of upside there, but not much. And the effective field goal percentage speaks for itself. I mean, 50.6% effective field goal percentage, and then shot 27.9% from the mid range. So bad shooter, not a great facilitator, inconsistent defender. There were times where he showed flashes as a point of attack defender, in terms of being able to, utilize his athleticism and his strength in terms of guarding multiple positions. And I think he showed some flashes as a strong side defender, but the weak side defense needs help, and the consistency overall on the defensive side needs help. So not a lot going for DEREON outside of being an elite slasher. And I think out of all the guys that we're going to talk about today, I think DEREON probably has the least likelihood of having a career at the NBA level. However, he just has a part of his skill set that's just the best out of everyone else in this entire draft class. So I think teams will be able to recognize that and say, hey, we can work on his defense. Hey, we can work on getting him to recognize these open shooters, and getting him to recognize these open big men, right? Through development, the development and better coaching and whatnot, right? So I think picking a player with good athleticism, good size, and has just one elite skill set, and then we can kind of just take that player and just kind of build around that skill set and kind of work on other parts of his game. I feel like that's something that teams will be able to recognize, and that's the main reason why I have DEREON SEABRON on my list of prospects to talk about today. Moving on to the fifth player I wanted to talk about today, and that is Max Christie, the freshman out of Michigan State, who is 19 years old, stands at about 6 feet 5 inches, weighs about 190 pounds, and has a 6 foot 8 inch wingspan. Impressive physical profile for Max Christie, especially with that length. However, maybe not super impressive, but he's a lanky, wing / bigger guard. But another case of the physical profile isn't everything. A reason why I give the physical profile is to give you guys an outline of these players, how they look on the court, right, with their measurements and whatnot. However, DEREON SEABRON is 180 pounds. Max Christie is 190 pounds. DEREON SEABRON is 180 pounds of muscle. Max Christie is 190 pounds of well, I don't know, but Max Christie is just very skinny. Okay, Max Christie is very skinny, and I feel like that's the big thing that holds him back is just his lack of strength, and that was really apparent this year on the court for Michigan State and Tom Izzo. I think it was the big reason why he had a relatively disappointing year compared to a lot of expectations, as Max Christie was considered a top 20 pick coming into the year, and obviously has fallen to be a second round pick after a relatively disappointing season at Michigan State, where he did average 9.3 points, 3.5 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 0.5 steals, 0.5 blocks, and 1.5 turnovers per game. Again, not the best counting stats, and the efficiency numbers back that up. We had a bad, very bad 44.9% effective field goal percentage, 82.4% from the free throw line, 31.7% from the 3-point line, 47.9% at the rim, and 41% from mid-range. I mean, again, the lack of strength kind of just shows up in the stats. I mean, 47.9% at the rim. I mean, that is awful. That is disgustingly bad. That is awful. However, Max Christie was considered a lanky sharpshooter coming into the college season, and you did see flashes of that, right? He has a picture-perfect form. It's beautiful. I saw him play against Rutgers, where we kind of kicked their butt this previous season, kind of blew them out, at the rack or down the Jersey Mike's Arena. Terrible name. I don't know. I know why they changed it, because Jersey Mike's paying them a lot of money. But the rack is still cooler, so we're gonna call it the rack. I saw Michigan State get their butt kicked at the rack, where Max Christie looked overwhelmed physically. He was playing against the likes of a player like Paul Mulaki, was kind of having his way with Max Christie in the post and whatnot. And Paul Mulaki is a great player, very good player for us this previous season. However, we're talking about a guy who's not a starter on a good amount of different college teams, and so Max Christie is going to be playing in the NBA next season with much bigger, stronger, extremely a lot more talented guys. So that's definitely a huge concern with Max Christie, and I think the potential with Max Christie is more so long term. You saw the talent as a shooter, his ability to create his own shot, and I think he's a little bit underrated as a pick and roll creator, as a passer. I think he definitely did show some flashes in terms of being able to hit open shooters and whatnot, especially with that right hand of his. And I really liked what I saw from Max Christie as a defender. Again, the strength is a big problem, but he showed that he's a solid off-ball defender, especially as a weak side, where he's conscious. You see him when you watch him, not only on tape but also in person. You see him, looking. Here's my man. Here's the ball. Here's my man. Here's the ball. Here's my man. Here's the ball. Right? You see him constantly turning his head, keeping it on a swivel and whatnot. And that really impressed me, and that really stood out to me when watching Max Christie film. And I don't think he's terrible in terms of creating turnovers. I know the numbers aren't great, but I think he showcased some flashes of being able to utilize that length of his, right? And again, the shooting percentage isn't great from three, but I think a lot of that is when he holds his form. I think a lot of times Max Christie kind of drops his hands. Whenever he kind of holds his hands for that extra second, the shots pretty much go in. So I really like Max Christie's upside, and I think he could be a potential positive return on investment for whatever team drafts him if he does end up falling to the second round. However, I think the weight is something that he's definitely going to have to work on. He's definitely going to have to work on not just adding weight, but strength. He just needs to get stronger. He doesn't need to be 220 pounds. If he has 6-7 pounds of just muscle, that's enough for him to probably be a late rotation player, possibly even next season, because I think the skill is there, some refinement here and there, but I think for the most part, Max Christie's a skilled player. He's a skilled player, skilled two-way player, right? I think the big thing is with him was just strength this previous season. If he works on that, I think he could be a potential steal for whatever team drafts him, especially if he ends up falling to the second round in this year's draft. Moving on to the sixth player I want to talk about today, and that is Jabari Walker, the sophomore out of Colorado, who is 19 years old, stands at about 6 feet 8 inches, weighs about 215 pounds, that is a 6 foot 10 inch wingspan. Super impressive physical profile for Jabari. Tall, long, wing slash forward, who is very strong. Those 215 pounds we talked about before, how the weight can be a little bit deceiving. That's not the case with Jabari. He's 215 pounds of muscle. This guy is out there looking like a bodybuilder out there on the court a lot of times. I mean, Jabari is swole, and he utilizes that strength well. And not only is he strong, is he long, but he's athletic. He's a very good vertical athlete. Very quick out there on the court, has good lateral speed, not the best lateral footwork. That's something that we will talk about. His perimeter defense could be a bit inconsistent, or his on-ball defense, point of attack defense. However, we're going to take a quick look at his on-court stats this year, where he did average 14.6 points, 9.4 rebounds, 1.2 assists, 0.7 steals, 0.7 blocks, and 2.3 turnovers per game. Not the best, not the year that a lot of people were anticipating. A lot of people thought Jabari Walker would kind of break out in his sophomore season, kind of, really take over and be, solidify himself as a first round pick. That didn't happen. And ultimately, Jabari Walker is most likely going to fall to be a mid 40s to early 50s, potentially even late 50s kind of guy. And even though he's super athletic, that's probably his best trait. He has shown flashes as a shooter. The percentages aren't necessarily great, as he does have a 51.3% effective field goal percentage, which is not great. It's average. It's not. It's mediocre. It's a below average, right? He shot 78.4% from the free throw line, 34.6% from three, so not terrible. I really like that free throw percentage. Good free throw shooter. I think he's a better three-point shooter than the percentages show as well. However, he did shoot 56.7% at the rim, which isn't great. And he also shot 35.4% on mid-range shots, which isn't great either. I think, just his lack of touch really as a mid-range shooter and really at the rim. I think a lot of that was just he's just not all that polished around the rim right now. And I think that's something that, he could definitely work on. He definitely has all the tools to become a better finisher at the rim. And I don't really care all that much for him as a mid-range shooter, simply because I don't think that's going to be his role at the next level. I think if he does make a career for himself, it's going to be as a role player, as a guy who's going to be able to defend multiple positions and knock down shots. And ultimately, the reason why he's going to fall as much as he is because of the shooting and the inconsistent defense. I think if he was a stout defender and an inconsistent shooter, I think he would be a much higher pick than he is. But because he projects to be, if he does have a career, a 3-and-D player, and he's an inconsistent defender and a shooter who has shown flashes but isn't, some all-worldly shooter, that's not great, right? That's not great. And again, I think there are flashes for him as a shooter, right? And I do think he has shown flashes as a defender. He has shown flashes as a weak side rim protector, I think, and being able to pick off passing lanes. However, the point of attack defense has been hit or miss. I think his lateral footwork, not the speed, but the footwork itself, can get a little bit choppy when he's guarding guards. However, outside of that, I mean, even at the NBA Combine, for those of you that haven't seen too much Jabari Walker film, if you go back, watch his Combine film, you can see how athletic he is. That really stands out, and as well as some of his shooting flashes. I think the release is a part of a shot that can definitely be worked on to help his translation to the NBA game. But when you just look at Jabari, just such a plus athlete, good physical profile with the shooting upside that he has and the potential to guard multiple positions. I think if he ends up with a team and they view him as a long-term project, they keep him with their G League affiliate, let him work on his game, refine it. He's super young. Get him with a developmental staff. He ends up in a good situation. I can really see Jabari Walker becoming something in the future. Now, again, it's no guarantee by any means, just given how raw he is. Outside of the athleticism and some of the shooting, the potential of the shooting and the potential as a defender, there's not much to really be to really have your hopes up regarding Jabari's skill set, right? But just given again the athleticism and some of the tools, I think some team will definitely buy it. Hopefully, again, take that skill similar to what we talked about DEREON. Kind of take, when DEREON was the elite slasher, Jabari has the elite physical tools out of all these players. And I think, if a team will see this, see how young he is, see the potential there, and kind of work on him. And I can definitely see Jabari Walker becoming, a role player at the NBA level. Again, just given the athletic tools and some of the upside on both sides of the floor. Moving on to the seventh and final prospect that I wanted to discuss today, and that is Gabriele Procida out of Italy, the wing who just finished up his third season playing in Liga Series A, which is basically the best league in Europe. This season he did play for Fortitudo Kiligi, which they weren't a great team. They finished 9-21. However, him playing, and getting experience for the past 3 seasons at the best level of competition in Italy, it's definitely a plus. The Italian league it's not the best, but it's definitely up there, right? However, he's moving on to his profile. He is 20 years old, stands at about 6 feet 7 inches, weighs about 195 pounds, and has a 6 foot 8-inch wingspan. Now, the wingspan is definitely not great. However, he doesn't really necessarily need it because Gabriele is able to impact the game outside of just, his length. He's definitely a big prospect. He's a lanky prospect when you watch him out there. However, he's extremely athletic, very quick in the open floor, one of the best vertical athletes in this class, in my opinion, just the way he's able to get up and catch a ball and catch passes that are thrown up to him around the rim. One of the better vertical threats amongst the wings in this class. Actually, I think he's one of the better vertical threats amongst the wings in this class in terms of vertical spacing and whatnot. And he's very laterally quick as well. Even though his lateral footwork is something that he will have to work on. He's an athletic, lanky wing prospect. And, one of the big things about Gabriele is just his shooting, as we don't have any, big advanced stats on him. However, he did have a 62.4% effective field goal percentage, shot 78.4% from the free throw line, and 38.3% from behind the arc. So good numbers, even though he doesn't have the highest of volume, even though the team wasn't great, he wasn't, featured as, a really, a driving force of the offense. However, he was efficient in the shots that he did take. So, you like to see that. And, that kind of shows that he can play within his role, do what he's asked to do on the offensive side of the floor, right? As he did average 7 points, 3 rebounds, almost 1 assist at 0.7 assists, 0.8 rebounds, 0.3 blocks, and 0.7 turnovers per game. So not, super high counting stats, but that's typical with a lot of overseas prospects. So you kind of have to take what you get, take the stats with a grain of salt, and really the film is, I think, what's most important. And I really like Gabriel. I really like his potential as a long-term prospect. I think teams will be able to see his athleticism, see the potential of a floor spacer at the wing that is athletic and as quick as Gabriel is. Defensively, he definitely has his struggles. I will say that. He's, again, similar to Jabari. The lateral foot speed is great. His lateral quickness is great. However, the footwork itself is not great. I think he needs to do a better job of sliding his feet and really taking more choppier steps instead of such long steps for a guy that's as laterally quick as he is. And I think he has shown flashes as being a weak side rim protector, but that is something that he will have to work on as well. And just overall his IQ on the as a weak side defender in general. And he did a pretty good job, picking off passes as a strong side defender. So I think there is definitely upside for in that department. However, Gabriel's main, his main drive is just being athletic, 3 and D wing, and it's going to take a lot of work. His shooting is good, but it's not great. I think he will be, probably an average shooter at the beginning of his NBA career, and hopefully he can work his way up, with proper development and whatnot. And outside of that, I mean, the defense is going to take some time, I think. So he's definitely a long-term project, might even be a draft and stash. However, I think he has enough potential and enough upside, and I think he could even provide some decent end of the rotation minutes to some teams, I think, right away, just given his shooting and his athleticism and his positional size. So I really like that about Gabriel, but the defense's work, he's not much of a passer, creative for others. So I mean, yeah, I mean, he's an athletic player. I like the shooting and I like the potential as a defender, but it's gonna take a lot of work. And I think he's probably best off, with a team drafting him, having him play with their G League affiliate, and kind of developing him the same path as a player like Jabari Smith. However, I can definitely see Gabriel going, being a top 40 pick, and I definitely think he will be picked higher than Gabriel. And then, excuse me, Gabriel will definitely be picked higher than Jabari in my mind, come draft day next week. And that's in the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think about all these prospects in the comments section below. I know the video was a bit on the longer side. However, I wanted to get about 5 minutes on each of the 7 prospects, kind of give my thoughts on them, and why I like them so much and why I see them potentially having a spot in the NBA. Right? I like all these players, and I think there's a good shot for all of them to have roles at the NBA level. Will I hit on all of them? No, but hopefully I hit. If I hit on 1 or 2, or potentially even more of these players, I would call this video a success overall. However, I'm rooting for all of them, and I hope that they all have solid NBA careers. But you guys, let me know which is your favorite of these prospects, which of these guys you dislike the most. So let me know what you guys think about all these guys in the comment section below. But aside from that, that's the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and if you have subscribed, please share the video with a friend. I want to keep growing the channel, keep growing the community that we have here. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So have a blessed day and take care, everybody. Peace.